If you're an anime fan, now is the time to sign up for Verve and try it out for free, as they just added High Five as a channel to their lineup where you can get tons and tons of new anime never before seen on Verve, dubbed and subbed from High Five, including shows like Akame ga Kill, Flip Flappers, Food Wars, tons of shows that have never been on Verve before, a part of their platform, High School of the Dead. I mean, you can see it right there on your screen, and they're always adding new stuff. So check out Verve. The link is in the description. Try it out for free right now. So the movie I saw tonight was Bohemian Rhapsody, directed by Bryan Singer, who's famous for a lot of really great films. Obviously, I would say the most geeky, because this is a world of geekdom, movies he's done are the X-Men movies, X-Men 1, 2, Days of Futures Past, and X-Men Apocalypse. But I would say that his most critically acclaimed movie was probably The Usual Suspects, and also At Pupil was pretty good as well. The guy's got a good resume, and here we go with his new biopic, which is supposed to be the story of not just the band Queen, but specifically Freddie Mercury. And before even seeing the film, like with many biopics, what's going to carry this movie is going to be the performance of the actors and whether or not they can portray a accurate representation of a person who existed in the real world, who was as unique and as bombastic as Freddie Mercury. And Rami Malek, I think, does a great job as Freddie Mercury. The one thing I will say about this film aesthetically is that they did an incredible job of making the actors look like the original band members. It's pretty freaking crazy. Brian May, Roger Taylor, these guys, were played by Gwynlyn Lee and Ben Hardy, and they look like the members of Queen. Like they look accurate, like scary, to the point where it's like creepy as to how much they look like the real people. But is the movie good? That's why you're here. The thing about doing a biopic on Queen and Freddie Mercury specifically is that it's very hard to capture his entire life within 2 hours. And it's weird because in this movie, telling the story of Queen with so many classic songs and so many hits is very, very challenging. And I feel like in this movie, there were good parts and bad parts. And one of the things that I found interesting is that even though they didn't get everything as far as Freddie Mercury's life goes, the movie at times does feel like it's a little bit too long. The actual runtime of the movie is a little bit over 2 hours, about 134 minutes, and they still really couldn't capture everything of Freddie Mercury. But Rami Malek, without question, captures the essence of Freddie Mercury. Now, what made this movie a bit different from other biopics is that they don't really spend too much time on Freddie Mercury's childhood. Literally, there's a couple of scenes here and there at the beginning of the film, then they jump to how Freddie got into the band. So really, the story, I think, had a bit of a problem because I wasn't sure if I was watching a Queen biopic or a Freddie Mercury biopic at times, because there wasn't too much of a focus on Freddie Mercury from the get-go. Usually with these movies, you've got the childhood, then you've got the success, and then the fall. What they did with this film is they primarily focus on the story of Freddie Mercury with Queen, not so much other things, but there is a section of the film that does focus on other aspects of his life in the middle of it, and I did feel that it was somewhat poorly edited. I think that the editing in the movie is a little bit wonky. There are certain scenes that kind of feel like they should be moved around, but I will say that even putting aside sort of the weird editing when it came to like certain scenes, I will say that the decision that Bryan Singer made of focusing on the Live Aid concert from Wembley Stadium as being the big pinnacle of the film, I think was a smart choice. It actually reminded me of the 90s Selena biopic starring Jennifer Lopez, how the film is sort of somewhat centered around her performance at the Houston Astrodome, which is like a big stadium show. Same thing with Live Aid. So rather than focus on Freddie Mercury's body sort of, falling apart when he got AIDS and, things they could have done to kind of make the movie sad, the movie ends on a high note because we see Freddie Mercury and Queen at the Live Aid concert performing their songs, and it just goes to show that that is the legacy of Freddie Mercury. It's not seeing his body fall apart like we did in Jim Carrey's Man on the Moon, which is a great movie also, by the way, don't get me wrong, great biopic also. Here, it wasn't necessary because they told you he died of AIDS right before the credits roll, and it's not the culmination of his story. The culmination of the story of Freddie Mercury is he wanted to be great, he wanted to do great things, and like his dad said, good thoughts, good words, good deeds. And that was a very emotional scene. And the end of the movie is very emotional, especially if you're a fan of Queen. In the theater that I was in, people were crying during the finale, and people were applauding like crazy. I haven't seen a film get an applause like that in a long, long time. I went to see Star Wars Force Awakens, and that got a roaring applause. Last Jedi, not so much. But this movie got an applause. I think a lot of people in the audience were Queen fans, in my showing anyways. And at the end of the film, Queen plays at Live Aid. Now, some people, I think, would say that maybe they dragged it on too long, because that last sequence when they're at Live Aid, they show I think 3 or 4 songs, and it's almost like you're watching the concert over again. The concert's on YouTube. Same thing with Selena's Houston Astrodome concert. And yeah, they did kind of spend a lot of time on that, but it was crazy as to how much Rami Malek studied that footage, because even though it wasn't 100% perfect to what Freddie Mercury did, the mannerisms, the way that he used his eyes, his shoulders, this guy is a great, great actor, and he did his homework to capture Freddie Mercury for sure. Now, it's been reported that Brian May and Roger Taylor were a part of the production of the film from day one, and the whole point of the film is to show just what a bombastic and powerful character Freddie Mercury was. What a insanely unique human being he was, and the movie certainly captured that. One thing I will say is that there was a little bit of, and all these movies kind of do something like this, where they do paint him as somewhat of a prick, because very creative people are that way. And I've seen some people say the movie didn't really capture that side of him that much, but I disagree. I think that seeing what Freddie Mercury did, the way that he kind of got selfish there in one part when he wanted to go solo, and the fact that he kind of abandoned his family, who was, and I don't mean his actual family, I mean Queen, to kind of get all drugged out and party, and what Hollywood does to you, I think was in the film. Should they have had more scenes like that? Maybe. I kind of see where that's coming from, because the movie does feel like it's missing something. Like I mentioned the editing earlier. As you're watching the film, I'm just wondering if there's a longer cut or something, because the movie feels like it's disjointed, like it's missing something. And maybe it is that. Maybe that's what it's missing, more of Freddie Mercury being a prick. But it's definitely in the film. It's definitely there, but you still kind of feel for the guy. And that's what the movie's meant to do, is to kind of show this generation who Freddie Mercury was and how important he was in the history of music. And after you leave the movie, you do want to kind of go and look at documentaries and interviews about Freddie Mercury to get the rest of the story. But really, as far as the movie being entertaining, I was not bored. This movie was incredible, and I think a big part of it is Rami Malek. Dude, this guy, if he's not nominated for Best Actor, I mean, he was Freddie Mercury. It's like Freddie Mercury came back to life, and you have to see this movie, especially if you're a Queen fan. You have to see it. If you're not a Queen fan, I think you might be lost at some of the references, but I think you'll pick up on them enough to where after the movie, you'll go look it up. But it doesn't really try to confuse you or anything like that, but it does focus on Mercury more so than the story of Queen, so there's still going to be things that were left out. Like, for example, I was totally going into this movie expecting to see a scene with David Bowie and Freddie Mercury coming up with Under Pressure in the studio. We didn't get that, but we did see the creation, the embryonic phase of songs like Bohemian Rhapsody and We Will Rock You, which might be the 2 most popular songs of Queen's entire catalog. And they do show kind of how they created these songs. Now, the movie does also briefly tackle the corruption in the music industry, how there's people trying to puppeteer other people and the corporate sort of mechanics, but it does show and portray Freddie Mercury as a bit of a rebel. But one thing that I did appreciate is how they portrayed Freddie Mercury's bisexuality. Now, obviously, Bryan Singer's going to know a lot more about that, because he is LGBT from what I understand. I don't know the guy personally, but I read that he was gay. So for him to direct this film, the whole stuff with, Freddie Mercury discovering he was bisexual, or at least coming to terms that he was bisexual, was handled really, really well. And it wasn't meant to pander to LGBT or to, disrespect LGBT at all. It was handled perfectly. It was like, there are gay characters in this movie, and they're just gay. And even though being gay is part of the story of Freddie Mercury, and looking back, it wasn't treated like a gimmick. And I was really happy that it was just part of his story. And I was very happy that the audience I saw it in, when they show some of the stuff, there's no nudity or anything, but when they show like affection between two men, the audience was very accepting of it. So that makes me feel a lot better, because there's other movies I've seen that have done similar things, and the audience craps on it because, well, they're stuck in like the 1800s. But still, if you're going to tell the story of Freddie Mercury, you have to at least touch on that, and they did touch on it, but it wasn't a primary focus because it's not so much about his personal life, which I do think is a bit of a flaw. There was so much more they could have put in this movie that they didn't put in, but as a movie, I think it works. It didn't bother me too much. It was a good story. It was the story of Freddie Mercury, and it's one that I'm probably going to pick up on Blu-ray when it comes out because it's a good biopic. I mean, there are some historical inaccuracies. I will say that. All these movies seem to have one or two. It's not as bad as Tupac using an iPhone in 1996. It's not that bad, but there are some historical inaccuracies here and there. I'm a Queen fan, but I'm not a Queen historian. So if you're looking for an in-depth analysis on what the movie got wrong, I can't give you that because I don't know everything about Queen. But I know that some of the stuff was shuffled around just for the sake of it being a film. Again, didn't really bother me too much, but if you are a Queen historian, you might be irritated at it, but that's not the point. The point is this guy, Freddie Mercury, was special. He was put on Earth to be special, and I love, there's a scene in the film where he tells Queen that he has AIDS, and when he tells them, he says, I don't want you to tell anybody because I don't want to be a poster boy for AIDS. I don't want to be the guy who everybody looks at and says, oh, he's got AIDS and he's going to help out. No, he tells them, he's like, I want to be a performer. I want to make everybody in that audience happy. I don't want them to think about me having AIDS. I want them to view me as an entertainer who they love. And that really, I mean, I'm paraphrasing. He didn't say it in those words, but that really hit me because he says in the movie, I'm going to be what I want to be. And that was the entire point of the movie. There's a relationship with him and his father, and his father's like, oh, don't waste your time. Then you have this crooked record executive who keeps telling him, oh, opera will never work. Bohemian Rhapsody is 6 minutes long. It'll never get played on the radio. And Freddie Mercury makes them all look stupid. But at the end of the movie, though, he does have a really touching moment with his father, which I did enjoy. And that crooked executive has to watch Freddie Mercury perform in front of 80,000 people at Live Aid. And, he was pretty much eating his own poo at watching that, and that was a very satisfying part of the movie as well. But understand, this is Freddie Mercury's story. The other band members, we don't find out anything about their childhood or any of that stuff. That's not what it's about. But it is about his interactions with the band. And, I thought the scenes with him in the band did feel a little bit VH1-ish, if you know what I'm saying. But they weren't bad at all. They got better closer to the end of the film, and it does climax very well. So if you're a Queen fan, you got to go see this movie. Like Siskel and Ebert would say, I'm going to give this movie a thumbs up. It's a good film, not a perfect film. There are things that they didn't really touch on that they should have, but they didn't have enough time because this is a 2.5 hour movie almost, not a 3 to 5 hour documentary with multiple parts. They had to leave some stuff out, but it still, I thought it was well done and well crafted, even though there's some editing problems in the movie. So that's it. Thanks for watching, and I love you all, and I'll see you soon.